Hello and welcome to the Doofcast, the official variety podcast of doofmedia.com. My name is Scott Daly, and today I'm going to take you on a guided tour of some video games created by my favorite developer, Matt Freeman.
Scott, I really wish you wouldn't do this.
We're going to talk all about the games and why we think Matt is just so gosh darn depressed.
Actually, I'm really fine mostly. I just like to explore interesting,
Maybe at the end of this, we can convince Matt to make some more games.
Please stop.
This week on the show, we are doing another one of our patron-produced episodes. For those of you that don't know, folks who pledge to us at the Doof Warrior level on Patreon, that's patreon.com/doofmedia, get to select a movie, short story, or in this case, a short video game for us to do a topic on. This week, Patron Torch Salesman asked us to look at the 2015 video game, The Beginner's Guide. And Matt, this is going to be a very different kind of conversation, but I think a very interesting conversation nonetheless. We don't do video games that often on the show.
And this is a very unusual video game.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I hesitate to say much beyond that, but I am walking into this conversation with really less certainty of what I'm going to say than I've ever had on any of our shows, because it's such an unusual thing to be covering.
Yeah, and I think that the tactic I want to take for this, because I agree with you, and I think I'm right there with you, I want this to be more of us exploring how we feel about this game rather than us. I don't think we ever lecture, but I agree. I think this is going to be a journey of a conversation rather than two people talking about their reads of something.
I agree.
I think this is all we're doing on the podcast this week. It's kind of a special week because while you're listening to this, I am away at a film festival, and I'll be gone for a whole week, so we are not going to have another episode next week, but we're releasing this one this Friday. We wanted to make sure we get this in, so we're recording it a little early for us. So this is all we're doing this week. We're just talking about this game, and we are going to have to spoiler this game. You cannot talk about this game without spoilering it, and this is one of those things. I am a person who doesn't really believe that spoilers are all that important. We always put the warnings in the podcast because I respect other people's opinions and I don't want to ruin anything for anyone unwarned. But I generally think that the how of something is better than just the what. That the way you tell the story is better than what literally happens in the story. So I don't think spoilers ruin things for you that much. However, there are exceptions to every rule, and I think this is one of those exceptions, Matt. I think that people should, if you have not played this game before and you were thinking of playing this game and you were listening to us wondering if you should play the game, short answer, yes, go play it. Do not listen to this conversation before you play it, because I think this thing works the way it does, specifically if you go into it knowing as little as possible.
Yeah, I personally, I hadn't played the Stanley Parable, and I really don't know anything about the Stanley Parable, which is the other game created by this artist. And so I knew nothing, and I feel like that made the experience better for me overall. So yeah, I agree with Scott, as little as you can possibly know. But, if you're kind of on the fence, then I don't think it would destroy the experience of the game necessarily to listen to our conversation.
It definitely won't explore the meaning of the game and why I think the game works as well as it does, but I think it would definitely harm the experience of it. I think so.
Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah. With that said, let's just dive right into it, and let's talk about The Beginner's Guide.
Let's say you sit down at a stranger's computer. You start opening up files and looking through stuff, and eventually you come to a folder that just says My Work. So you open it, and you click on a random file, and it's a video game that looks like this. If you had to guess, what would you say you know about this person right now? Like, maybe they're kinda goofy. Okay, you close that, you scroll down a bit, and you open up a new file. It's another game. Do you think this person is happy? Are they unhappy? Now another one. What do you think is comfortable for this person? What puts them at ease? Do you think they're lonely? What's missing in their life? Keep going, open another file. Let's look at all of them. Let's unpack this person. Are they upset about something or fighting something? What do you think makes this person angry? What kinds of friends do they have? Do they even enjoy making video games at all? Take all of these images, hold them in your mind, and now try to imagine, without ever having met this person, who they are. Okay, let's do it. Let's find out if you're right.
So, like you said, Matt, you had never played the Stanley Parable. You had never played this game. I have also never played this game. However, I have played the Stanley Parable. So I kind of want to start the conversation at the beginning of the game and just talk about your early experiences as you booted the game up and get into it and kind of learning, because I think we both were learning what this was as we were playing it. We had no idea. I looked up nothing. I knew absolutely nothing about this game, and just like what it kind of presents itself as and how Davey uses what it's presented as to kind of maybe like trick you a little bit, I think.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, the whole thing is framed as a big it's a big meta. Is metatextual the right word here? I don't even know.
I don't even know.
It's a big meta trick where, I mean, let's just say it right out. The game begins leading you to believe that he is going to be showing you some interesting artistic ideas from the games of this friend of his. Yeah. This friend of his who's very prolific, makes a lot of small, interesting, abstract, and mood oriented and just very strange games, and this guy is sort of curating them and showing them to us to make some kind of point. And what's interesting is it literally goes off the rails, because he's like, we're going to be leading towards something. He like toward the beginning, he basically lies. He's basically an unreliable narrator. He's like, yeah, we're definitely going somewhere with this. I have this thesis that I'm going to be illustrating with his games, and it's like, yeah, no, that's not actually what ends up happening at all.
Yeah. I mean, and the interesting thing is the director, designer, developer of this game is a guy named Davey Redden. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, but he is also the narrator. Right. He's the voice. And so what this game kind of does is it posits itself as, this is a developer. This is a guy I know because I played one of his games. I played Stanley Parable, and the developer is just talking to me, and he's talking to me about this friend he has named Coda. And I am not well versed in the world of game development enough that I know the names of a lot of small independent developers. So the game presents itself as if this person, Coda, is absolutely fundamentally a real person, and these are his real games, and this is just going to be a journey through. I'm just going to show you these games, and I'm going to talk to you about game development. I'm going to talk to you about, maybe narrative theory and game development theory, and we're going to use this guy's abstract games to have a discussion about this thing. And I'm like, oh, well, that's cool. I'm interested in that. That sounds like something that's up my alley. And of course, in the back of my head, I'm also thinking about Stanley Parable, but I'm also thinking about Torch Salesman, who's one of our patrons who wanted us to discuss this for specific reasons. So I'm kind of trying in my head to unlock what the reasons are. And when it seems to be a narrative, kind of about narrative, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. It makes sense why Torch Salesman knows Matt and I like this very much. It makes sense that he would want us to look at that. And so like all this stuff is kind of spiraling through your head as you're kind of being presented with this very simplistic, like guided tour type of game where there's really no gameplay at all.
Yeah, that's the most fascinating thing about this to me overall is I just kind of didn't know you could do this with a video game and have it work. Like, like you said, it's a guided tour. It's an experience. It is very much on rails. Interestingly, doesn't really feel like it's on rails somehow, but like, it's continually playing with your sense of what exactly you're doing and why you're here. It's using like every tool at the disposal of the game, the medium of game, right? Like, yeah, like it's putting you in these interesting environments that all kind of have their own feel to them. Like very, like I couldn't even list all of the environments and what I think he's trying to do with that environment. Like there's the house in the middle of the empty white space, and then you're asked to basically describe what did you see, and it's like all of the answers are true. So the answer that you give is going to be then you have to think about like, well, what is the most salient aspect of what I just experienced? Is it the house? Yeah. Is it the prison that I went through? Is it it's continually, it's like really forcing you to analyze and pay attention to the experience that you're actually having. And then of course there's the level where the narrator himself is kind of you realize that he's not being straight with you gradually.
Yeah.
And then that adds a whole new level of like discomfort to it.
Right. Well, I mean, one of the things I loved, I mean, like at the beginning, I think Davey is doing a thing that is similar to what you and I do on a regular basis, right? He's exploring this thing created by someone else, and he's interpreting their meaning, and he's drawing conclusions about the person who made the thing based on the thing he made. And that is something that you and I do all the time. And I'm going to be completely honest here. The way that this game explores that central idea made me very uncomfortable at times. It made me uncomfortable as a critic, as a person who does this all the time, does with this. And I think the character of Davy is doing things that we don't do, and it is manipulating things in a way that I hope we don't manipulate them. But fundamentally, what this story is about to me is this idea of, you know, taking art created by someone else and how we, the consumer, put ourselves in it and then draw conclusions based on what we're bringing to it. And that's important, and that's what people do. But to then extend those conclusions to the individual that's creating it and make that person and build a person out of that stuff as if you understand and know exactly what they're going through, that's where I think the game starts pushing back at that idea.
Yeah, there's that aspect. There's the aspect where Coda, the person, is like his boundaries are being transgressed by what Davey is doing. There's also the element that you eventually learn that Davey has been modifying the games and completely lying to you about this.
Well, what I love about that is he's doing it the whole time. You just are not paying attention to it until the game kind of points that out to you.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, there's a point in the game. This is like my favorite part in the experience was when this triggered, when you realize this, right? Because you're going through and you're doing all this stuff, and you're doing, one of the games is a cleanup game where it's very iterative, where like the point of the game seems to be that you just keep cleaning up things and the messes keep piling up and you just have to keep cleaning them up. And then suddenly our narrator goes, and then it ends and the door opens up and you can go continue on because you have to move forward. You always have to move forward. And you're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I don't know really how that ties into anything. But then, a few minutes later, he admits that game never ended. That was an iterative loop. It never ended. It never stopped. The only thing you could do was close out of the game. But he added opening the door, and then you learn a little bit later that he's adding all these lampposts.
Yeah.
And what that did for me is it made me realize that throughout this entire experience, that's what was happening, right? Like, there's one moment where you're in this one room and he's like, oh, it's just a simple room, but let me remove the walls and I'll show you how much complication is behind the surface. And that, in the moment, that set weirdly with me because I was like, well, how does that count as interpretation?
Yeah.
If you can't actually see it.
Right. He didn't want you to see that. And
right. Like the slow-mo walk up the stairs where you can't get into his room where all his ideas are and his like inner person. Like the point of that game is you can never get there. You're not supposed to get there.
Yeah, he does that later when he's like, and then you go into this jail cell and in the original game it makes you wait here for over an hour before the door opens. But I'm just going to skip that for you. And it's like and he talks about how like he would argue with Coda about the concept of like a game should be playable, and it's funny because you never eventually you sort of see some text directly from Coda, but even like well before that happens, I think you have an idea of who Coda is, and maybe even you begin to sense his frustration with this Davy character, because this is basically a character, right? Because like Davy wants the games to be a certain way, and he wants them to be saying a certain thing in a certain way that is clear to him, right? Like the whole idea of him putting the lamppost is him trying to make the games legible to him, to be like, it's all about reaching this destination, because games should be about reaching a destination, and the lamppost signifies the end point or something, whatever. We don't actually know, but Coda's like, no, I didn't have lampposts.
Yeah, stop putting lampposts in my games. Is what he specifically says to him. Yeah.
The lamppost, like I don't know. I feel like I'm reaching here, which is kind of funny considering the game that we're talking about. But I feel like the lamppost could symbolize the idea that like somebody, you review a piece of art and you super hyper focus in on something that is arguably not even really present. Like,
Yeah.
like you come to the movie with a thesis about how it's about, post-structuralist, postmodernist something.
Yeah.
And it's like that's the filmmaker had nothing like that in mind at the time, but you just
Yeah.
quote unquote prove that that's what the movie's about. And I think that is a not the best, not my favorite way of approaching criticism.
Yeah, I mean, it's not wrong either, though, right? I mean,
It can't be wrong by definition, but that's kind of a vacuous statement.
well, I think what speaks to me the most about this kind of thing is not that you can't go to a game or a movie or a book with you're gonna bring everything about you and the way you view the world into the story. You're always going to do that. It's like you can't not. It is literally impossible not to do that. So that's always going to happen. Davey is always going to look at Coda's games, and he's always going to be fascinated by a certain aspect of it, a certain bit of it, a certain part of it. And he's going to want to read conclusions from those parts. That's always going to happen. That happens with any of us. The part I think that the game is pushing back on is the specific starting to mutate and turn it into something that it isn't, is to changing the story to suit the thing that you believe it is, the mutating of it to become the thing that you wanted it to be.
Yeah.
And I think furthermore, because the part that really spoke to me was this idea of like, look at all these prison games. Look, he's all these prison games. And then he finally gets out of the prison, and then he like the time between games goes longer, and it's very clear that he's struggling with his creativity, and that must mean he's depressed. And it's drawing all these conclusions and drawing these lines. And look, I've done that before. Like, I mean, we spend a lot of time in the head, proverbially, of Wildbow, the author of the Worm and Ward books we read. And I have in my head said, oh, look at this. This must mean that Wildbow thinks this about this. And like you shouldn't do that. Like I think that's one of the things the game is pushing back against, this idea of that you can draw reliable conclusions about a person just based on their art.
Yeah, it's a bit condescending almost to imply that like this artist is not actually sufficiently in control of their medium that I'm going to trust that this choice was intentional rather than like a hidden cry for help.
Yeah.
And I agree. I do the same thing where I read into, who the author is based on who their character is. And in fact, I think I probably do that until I read like a couple of their books, and then I'm like, oh, they're actually capable of changing their voice so much that I now realize that that what I was reading before was just that character's voice, and that was not actually the author.
Which is not to say that you can't glean any information about an author from their work, right? Like that you absolutely can.
Yeah.
But I do think leaning too heavily on that gets to be dangerous.
Yeah.
And I think what is revealed by this story actually is everything that he was projecting onto this work and he was projecting onto this person was stuff that he himself was struggling
Absolutely.
with, that he was going through. And that's, I think that is one of the things that is both remarkable and dangerous about art, is that you see yourself in it, and you see the things that you're going through. Like, I will never forget, I watched this movie, Her, and it's one of my favorite movies of the decade. And it's because I saw this movie. I was recently out of a long-term relationship, and it is a movie about solitude, about loneliness. And I watched this movie by myself in a theater on a Saturday morning, right after I had been dumped by a girl. And it spoke to me in just a very specific way. This movie was about me. This was my movie, and I put so much of who I was into this movie. And I think my read of it was definitely colored by that, right? I definitely warped and changed the movie to fit what I was feeling at the time.
Yeah, I did.
And I think we do this constantly.
Yeah, I did the same thing with the Darjeeling Limited. The idea of the voiceover, the constant narration, is something that I want to return to. I mean,
let's talk about that.
We did touch on it, but like the idea of modifying the games directly is one thing, but when you think about it, the fact that you're playing these games within a framing story is another kind of modification. Like, it's like if you were to watch Taxi Driver like sitting with someone with a very particular take on what Taxi Driver is about, and them just talking about their take the whole time you're watching it for the first time, can completely distorting and contaminating in any chance you had of forming your own opinion. Like I remember, I think it was the game where you're sitting in the audience, and then you and then there's like a guru talking, and then you switch positions, and now you're the guru. And I distinctly remember thinking at the time, like, it's kind of annoying that he's like robbed me of the opportunity to come up with my own interpretation of what this is about. He's just blabbing. I mean, it's not annoying at the time, but he's clearly just pontificating about what his take is, and it kind of floods out your ability to formulate your own interpretation of what, Coda, who at that point I think I thought was a real person because I'm a rube, I guess.
Yeah. No, I don't think you're a rube, because I was pretty convinced. I kept going back and forth. Like, I was like, is this this gotta be a real person, right? No, maybe he's invented. Well, no. Yeah, I think, I think you're right. And I think it would be like the only experience you have with a movie is a video essay on the movie, right?
Yeah.
And that's it. And you're not getting an opportunity. I think I was right there with you. And there were also times when, like, I love to read into things. You know this. Most of the people that listen to us know this. I love to dive deep into something and really explore what it could mean. But there were moments in this game where I was like, I think that's just a block. Like, the very first level we see is a Counter-Strike level, and Coda has put in these just like untextured amorphous blobs of like black and random colors. And Davey is like, and look, this shows like how he's a little different thinking. And I was like, I just think he didn't finish the thing he was doing.
Yeah, I feel like he was experimenting with the engine, literally.
Right. He was not making a game. This is not a game. He was just screwing around, and you're like deriving deep meaning from this.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's a thing that's okay to do. And I think it's fun to do sometimes. But if you're attaching that to an overall thesis of the humanity of a person, it gets a little ridiculous.
Yeah, part of me wants to like go through each of the parts linearly, but I feel like that would take too long. But
I mean, we got all day.
It's true. You remind me of the part that's, I don't know if it's immediately subsequent to that, but the spaceship, where it's like it's the only one. It's almost the only one where you have a gun. There's very few where you have a gun, and there's no enemies. It's kind of funny because at that point I thought that the game is kind of messing with you a bit, because I'm so used to playing games with guns that I was like, oh, all right, we're going to be shooting something now. This is my wheelhouse. And then it's like, nope, not going to be any. And okay, I realize I'm doing too many parentheticals here, but like you have a little bit of anxiety. Like, okay, I have a gun. There's going to be something that's going to jump out. I'm going to have to shoot it. So you're getting a little bit anxious, and that lasts for about 15 seconds before he says, don't worry, there's not going to be anything to shoot at. It's just, and then you're like, oh, okay, that completely deflates all the tension.
Right.
It's just another example of the narration like interfering with your experience of, because like imagine like a legit game where you have a gun but there's nothing to shoot. You would spend like an hour looking around for the thing that you're supposed to shoot, right? Like that's how we've been trained. Anyway, to skip to the end of that, when he like glitches through the top, basically that's just the narrator completely extrapolating about like what they think this means and what Coda got out of it, and it's just like, no, this seems like it was just a glitch, a kind of beautiful looking glitch that you noticed and you projected some meaning onto. Davey.
And that's okay to do.
Yeah, true.
I mean, like that's a thing that I wrestle with in the back and forth. Like, I love coming up with meanings behind things and finding what this means to me and how it means that and why I felt the way I feel. I love doing that. And I think I respect Davey on a certain amount of level for like seeing this beautiful scene where you rise above and you like see the entire layout of the level, and it's this beautiful moment where you like see the entirety of the universe and your small size in it. But yeah, I mean, sometimes like you have to recognize that that's what you're bringing to it. That's you. That's what you're doing.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think each of the levels kind of maybe has a slightly different point or is approaching the main point from a slightly different angle. I'm just going to jump around, I guess, because I don't really...
I mean, here's one thing that I want to say before you feel free to jump around,
Sure.
but the idea of analyzing this game for meaning is kind of paradoxical to what I think the game is saying.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we're looking at what the developer of this game did to find out what he was trying to say about something via a game in which we think he's trying to say don't do this to a crazy extent.
Well, he's fighting a losing battle then. Sorry. But
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
I think if anything, it's extra fun for us because we get to speculate on what Kodo was actually trying to say and what Davey is actually trying to say.
Sure, yeah.
You know, like we were just talking about the idea of like what is the theater where you're the audience and then you're the guru. What does that mean? It's like, well, you can actually imagine that the fictional Coda meant one thing with it, but then Davey, in his choice to create and include this in the story, means something quite different. Within which the Coda meaning is embedded. Like that's some heavy shit right there, right? Like,
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, and we also have to. We have to wrestle with the idea that sometimes things don't have meanings behind them. I mean, like it's very possible that, like I think Coda says at the end of this thing is that like I just really like thought prisons were fun, and I was just playing with the idea of creating prison levels and seeing what it was like.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe it's like, I wonder if this is like, I'm starting, and again, this is what I'm bringing to it, but I'm starting to like take this as a specific critique to our deconstructing directors type of style, where you're not just searching for meaning within an individual piece of art, but you're attempting to take an artist's entire oeuvre and drive meaning across it. Like the idea of he was really obsessed with prison levels for a while. Does that mean he felt like he was in prison somewhere? And look, here's the last prison level he made, and this happened. Ergo, this was a collection of prison levels that he wanted us to experience. Yeah, I don't know.
So yeah, I mean, I feel like it's possible to be right and wrong. Like,
Sure.
that's a fake deep statement, but like, it's clear from the context of this game that Davey is this very like blinkered person where like there's a ton of like evidence, right? Like he talks about having these like long arguments with Coda about like should games be playable, and like he clearly wants games to be a certain way, and he seems like a bit of a pest actually. I mean, more than a bit of a pest, actually. He basically steals Coda's games and sort of passes them off as his own. It's difficult to... He never quite says that he does that, but he is definitely getting, like, social reinforcement for sharing these things that are not his.
Yeah, I mean, and the game goes into that, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I felt good. I felt accomplished. I felt like I had done something. And, like, you didn't do anything.
Right.
You just illegally gave someone else your thing.
And then he put lampposts in them so that
Yeah.
that takes on an interesting twist there, because it's almost like that's his, like, way of claiming it.
Right. Well, and he kind of proves himself right in that, right? Because, like, he takes Coda's game, edits it to a game that he thinks it should be, shares that game with someone, and then they like it, and it validates him, and it also validates the genius he sees in Coda in that he's manipulated things to be that way.
Yeah.
It's really complex and deep, and I just like it's fascinating to me it's like elegantly complex, but also relatively simple, right? Like there's not like, I don't know what to think about this, but it's not like confusing,
No.
right? Like I never felt confused as to what was going on.
It's many riffs on the same theme.
Yeah.
So the level notes is literally another interesting meta layer where Coda has left all of these notes lying around his own level, pretending that they are notes from random internet users.
Yeah, I love that.
So basically it's literally commentary. It's commentary sprinkled throughout and layering this world that he's built. And as you're walking through it, you're reading these commentary notes, and you're hearing another layer of commentary in your ears from Davey, who is like, it's this crazy, like I'm trying to read the notes and Davey keeps talking, and it's like I'm caught up in this maelstrom of meta commentary about the thing that I'm experiencing, and like forgetting to even notice, like, oh, there's this cool painting here. Like, if anything, like the painting is, you can't even pay attention to the painting because you're just looking at all the notes and what they're saying about the painting. I think that was actually a pretty cool moment. Like, that's a pretty almost on the nose moment where there's this interesting painting, and you're running around reading all the notes, or at least I'm running around reading all the notes to basically get everybody's take on the painting, which is hilarious because it's all Coda's take.
Right, and I like that because it's kind of Coda, it's Coda's interpretation of what the world is going to see in his game, and a lot of it is very critical. It's like, boring, when is something going to happen?
Right.
And you know what my favorite line in that whole thing was? My favorite line is when Davey, our narrator, says, "Don't bother looking at all the notes. Nothing special happens if you collect them all." And that's like a perfect summation of his entire philosophy, right? It's like there has to be a point, there has to be a reason, there has to be an end. And there is no, like, the point of the game is the notes. That is the point of the game, is to read the notes and hear what and see this commentary from this illusional internet that is not really there. And he's just like, don't bother reading all those. You don't have to read all of them. Just read a couple of them to just get an idea and then move on. And I'm like, no, that's it.
Yeah.
That's the game.
Yeah, because clearly, Coda spent a huge amount of time writing like hundreds of these little snippets, right?
Yeah.
And even if most of them are like silly, that's still part of the tone he's trying to create here.
Yeah.
I mean, if anything, that's what makes it kind of amazing is that's one of the first levels where it's just downright beautiful. I guess many of the levels prior to that are decent looking, but that's the first one where it really strongly breaks from the rectilinear grids of rooms. I think the one just prior to that started to break from it, but this one is just this winding maze of bridges and tunnels and twisting caverns and cool, creative, interesting architecture. And it's peppered with these extremely banal and masturbatory notes that are like you said, expressing Coda's sort of contempt for the way the public reacts to things and how it sort of fixates on itself. And here you are running around fixating on the notes rather than just like really artistically speaking, it would have been a different level without the notes, right? It would have been a different experience. Like, imagine walking through that with no Davey voiceover and no notes. It's a completely different artistic experience.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking right now, Davey tells you that this isn't real. This isn't really connected to the internet.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, he does. Yeah.
And like that, the game doesn't tell you that.
Yeah.
The game doesn't want you to know that. The game wants you to think these are real people. This is real commentary. And he's just so indifferent to the anything that the game is trying to do and trying to explore with that.
Yeah. That's a great point.
Yeah. So I mean, I think something you said there was really interesting, and it kind of gets to me what could be another interpretation of what this game is doing, where this game is, Davey is putting himself in the spot of Coda, and his players of the Stanley Parable are him, right? And so he's kind of commentating on the reaction to his game. And I know you haven't played that game, so you don't really know anything about it, but it is a very interesting kind of game. The concept of the Stanley Parable is basically you are a guy sitting at a computer, and you have a narrator kind of narrating what's going on in your story, and you the player can choose to listen to what the narrator's doing or do something else, and the game changes based on that. Like, the narrator will comment if you don't do that, or like if you just sit still and do nothing. And it's like this incredible branching game that has like multiple endings and all different things, and it's like can get very meta in some ways, and very really abstract and crazy in other ways. And it's a really fascinating experiment. I like it a lot as an idea, but it's also not a game that has like a traditional like ending, right? And I see things like Davey commenting on the "don't bother picking up all those things" it's not going to get you anything as commentary on how people play games and how people probably play the Stanley Parable. Like the idea of like, I want to get all the endings. What do I have to do to get all the endings?
Yeah.
And how that's just not the point. That's not what he's trying to do. That's not what he wants to explore. It's not, it's like, there are people in this medium that are trying to explore what the medium can do beyond just the simplicity of fun gameplay or traditional cinematic type story structure.
Yeah.
And that bumps up ahead against the the completionists, the what are the achievement hunters, that kind of thing. And not there's anything wrong with that. I just think there's some games in which that should be the quest, and there's some that it shouldn't be. I think when we talked about Undertale, we talked about the idea of replaying it, or for me, the idea of replaying it after I beat it felt like I shouldn't. Felt like I didn't belong back in the world. I completed the story, and how the game almost comments on that and says, "Yeah, you shouldn't be here again. You did this already. What are you doing? Go away."
Right. It remembers what you did the previous time too.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just think this game could be commenting on the reaction to his original game in that, and I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think. Yes, definitely that, but also just the general idea of consuming art. Well, yeah, I guess I'll talk specifically. Like I've never played Stanley Parable, but it does strike me that the way that the experience that he wants you to have, what you could call the game, is playing through it like one time, and the feeling that you're getting, the experience you're having as you go through that. And I absolutely understand the completionist instinct. I absolutely understand the instinct to want to see, what were all the other decision paths that were available in this game, because I want to understand everything that could have potentially happened. But now you have left the game. Now you have left the experience. Now you're in a separate experience off to the side, where you're actually, in a sense, violating the intent of the artist, because they really did just want you to have this one experience here. I'm not gonna like go back into the beginner's guide and read all of the notes that I didn't read or whatever, because it wouldn't be like that. Whatever it was, 2 hours that I spent playing this game, I was absolutely transfixed. Like I didn't know if I was going to sit through. I kind of started it. I was like, it's late. I don't know if I'm going to finish this. I'll just play some tonight and pick it up tomorrow. And I just was completely sucked into this experience and did not. I had no idea how much time had passed. I think I like missed some calls or something. Like if I go back into the game now to read the notes, that's not the same experience. That's just satisfying a kind of base curiosity that I'm sure we all have, right? I understand the instinct for it, but I also understand him as an artist being like, you're doing it wrong. That's not what it was supposed to be, and what you're getting out of it is a pale imitation of what I meant.
Yeah, and to be clear, because I feel like we're going to get a comment about it. I think Stanley Parable is a game that invites you to play it multiple times, but I don't think it's a game that wants you to gamify it and like checklist your way to getting each ending. It wants you to experience it and experience how it changes based on your decisions. A lot of the game is about how your decisions change the world, and so it wants you to experience those different changes, and it doesn't want to tell you what it is about. I think that's one thing that this is talking about too, this idea that like the game is supposed to have a purpose and it's supposed to tell you what its purpose is, and if you don't walk away understanding what the author was trying to do, then the game has failed. I don't think that's true, and I don't think the creator of this game thinks that's true, and I think that's something that everyone kind of wrestles with. I wrestle with it a lot, because sometimes I walk away from a movie and I want to say, okay, what were they trying to say here? And I mean, I think it's a fascinating idea to explore, and I like doing it a lot. But sometimes you have to, like what we've been saying, you have to admit that that's your interpretation of something, and not. And sometimes there's not going to be a satisfying answer. I go back to adaptation. Sorry, not adaptation. Annihilation. Although an adaptation you could do as well. But Annihilation is this super abstract movie that like I have like 7,000 different interpretations of what that movie's trying to say, and I love each and every one of them. And it takes a long time to get to where you understand those interpretations, and sometimes they contradict each other in weird ways, and you're like, well, wait, what does that mean? And I think that's just some of the fun of ingesting a story and not being just specifically told by a narrator what X means or Y means. And I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Annihilation is one actually where it's such an experience that at least me, while I was watching it, I don't know if I was spending a whole lot of time thinking about what it was trying to say. I definitely had fun thinking about it and talking about that later. But the first time I watched it, you're just like terrified and horrified when you're meant to be. You're curious and full of like awe and wonder when you're meant to be. And it's just the crafting of this unique and strange experience, which I see as a valid. I mean, obviously, it's a valid use of art. Like, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Like, you can just make something that's supposed to be really interesting and weird and trippy, and like I don't know if like I don't know, like Myst or something. Like, what is Myst trying to say? I think Myst is just trying to be a good puzzle like mystery game. I mean, yeah, you could probably read into the story. I'm sure you could.
Yeah,
you
absolutely can.
I'm sure there's all kinds of subtextual, but like mostly when you're playing Myst, you're kind of experiencing creepy environments, and then you're solving puzzles. The actual story of Myst is a minor background element to what it is to be playing Myst, and that's fine. Like, that's the cool thing about games, and that's the cool thing about this game is like I've never played anything close to a game like this. Like, I don't even know if this qualifies as being part of a genre. Like, you call it indie.
Yeah.
It's like you just call it indie because you don't know what to call it. It's a weird, like, it's an experience, right?
They called some of them walking sims, and like because you're just like walking forward and then things are happening to you. I've played a few of them, but this might be one of my favorites, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But
just to note what we were talking about earlier, the idea of being a completionist. Like, I remember Dragon Age Origins, and I remember thinking like the first time you play through it, you feel like there's just a vast space of possibilities that you could have explored, and things could have just ended up so much different than they did if you had made different choices. The game gives you this feeling because it gives you choices, and then things happen because of your choices. But if you play the game again, you realize that you actually are being subtly funneled down specific paths, and really there's not that. I mean, there's a fun amount of variety, but there's not that much variety. And
I would say the same thing with the Walking Dead series of games, where the first time you play it, it's like every choice truly matters, and the game is totally changing, and you see that really it's just like a handful of like forks in the road, and that's it.
And that's what's interesting is like the experience is strictly better when you don't know that. When you really think that this is a world that you're in and anything could happen based on your choices. Yeah. But you do the completionist thing and you literally ruin it for yourself.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the things I want to kind of parse with you on this game, because one of the things I've been looking for a long time is storytelling via video games that is unique, that is fundamentally different and fundamentally, isolated to this form of media. That so many video games are just movies with interactive bits. And very few games out there really explore this concept. And we talked about this with Undertale, because I think Undertale is a game that did this as well, that utilized the medium to tell a story in a way that you could not any other way. And the thing that is fascinating about this game with that is that there really is no gameplay here. Like there's really no choices that you're making. You're not changing the game based on how you play it. And yet it feels like this could not be done any other way than it is done in the story. And I'm not sure why that is.
Yeah. I guess it's just the fact that you're witnessing this weird psychological study of this Davy character. I guess I don't know what element you would put in it to give the player any kind of choice.
No, and I'm not even saying that it needs that. I'm just saying, like, most of the times when I sit there and think of, okay, what is an ideal story that uses the medium effectively? My choice is, well, player interaction, player choice. Like that is a thing that movies cannot replicate, that TV cannot replicate. This doesn't really have that, and yet I do feel like this is something that is completely unique to that medium. And I think it's the structure. I think it's the structure of playing a game, quote unquote, running through a level yourself, and having, as you said, commentary from different directions hitting you simultaneously as you ingest it yourself.
And
I think.
Yeah. And there are a few points in the game where you're supposed to do something.
Sure,
like you're supposed to walk into the beam. You're supposed to go talk to the person who is on the helm of the spaceship or whatever. You are what was the one I was going to say? You're the one who pushes the button on the puzzle every single time.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a really good point. And he always makes you be the one to break the game, right?
Yeah.
He can just make the walls go away, but he says push enter and the walls go away.
Yeah.
He could just make your speed return to normal while walking up the stairs, but he doesn't. It's push enter to make the speed. And so at the end of the day, even as you are being led through this world and Davey is breaking the games down for you, like, and literally breaking the point of the games, almost every single time it is you making that choice. It is you complying with what the narrator is telling you to do.
Thank you kindly. Yeah.
Yeah.
The tower is the, I guess, second to last level.
It's the last one's an epilogue, so it's the last level. Yeah.
That's the one that,
is broken. You literally cannot beat. Yeah.
So that was one where I was like tripping out because Davey is like agonizing and like struggling with himself. And like you're beginning to realize like how much of what he's been saying has been lies, and as this is happening, you're just like climbing up these twisting, tortured black switchback staircases in this dark, forbidding environment, and it's creepy, it's unsettling, it's like what kind of sick mind would make this? And you're walking through it, right? So I think my point in bringing that up in this context is like there's a difference between a movie showing like a protagonist walking through this environment, or I don't know, a book describing this environment, versus you are playing a WASD walking game, and you are the one walking through this environment. It gives you a sense of being there, being actually there, I don't know. I found that precise moment was maybe like the highlight of the game for me. Well, first of all, it's just so atmospheric and creepy, but also Davey's like having a breakdown during his narration.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that is something that you can stop and focus on a certain thing for a certain amount of time if you want.
Yeah.
That is entirely within your control. I think you're onto something there. I really like that. Let's talk about that final level, because I think one of the most disturbing things about it to me is the moment in which you start to see the notes from Coda.
Yeah.
The narrator is not really commenting on them specifically. He just kind of keeps talking. And meanwhile, you're seeing these notes that contradict and reveal him for the lie and that extremely damaged and unhealthy person he is. And I think there's something inherently unsettling about that. Like, please stop sharing my games. Like, please stop talking to me. Like, I'm going to ask you not to talk to me anymore.
Yeah, right. He's basically, it almost gives the sense that Davey has been a stalker, has been crossing every boundary that Coda has put up, and like he is literally doing that, because in this level, the only way Davey can get to the things that Coda is specifically telling him to stop it is if he cheats. Yeah.
And he changes the game, and he he removes the barriers that the developer of the game has specifically put in place to stop him from getting there. And it's almost as if you are reading this, you have done the exact thing I was trying to tell you not to do.
Yeah, right. I love when he puts the bridge over the invisible maze. It's just this jarring, sterile intrusion into the aesthetic of the of the room. It's just such a perfect way of saying like he's tampering with it in a way that is breaking what Coda is trying to do here.
Yeah, totally. I love that. Yeah.
I like the puzzle. So to contradict everything that I've said up to this point, I do wonder, because I solved the puzzle pretty quickly because it's a pretty simple puzzle. But I was like, at this point now, I'm like, I wonder if it took a while. Like if the player obviously was struggling to solve the puzzle the first time.
The door puzzle?
Yeah. Would Davey interject with the solution after like 30 seconds?
I bet he would have.
I bet he would.
I solved it relatively quickly too.
Yeah.
Just because there's not a lot of other options, right?
Yeah. Which it's interesting because when I solved it, I was actually like, I wonder if I push this button and then I run through the door, that could potentially put me in a situation where I am in like an unrecoverable state of the game. And I wonder if the game will let me do that, or how the game will react if I do that.
Yeah.
And then of course you realize that there's a switch on the other side of the door.
And I wonder if Davey added the switch on the other side of the door.
Yeah, maybe. So isn't it? I might be having a brain problem, but isn't it the case that the very last time the puzzle appears, there is no switch?
Yes.
Yeah. You're just trapped.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, it's interesting because like we can all come up with our own meaning of what the puzzle means. Like you have to you have to commit to the possibility that you're going to be trapped with no recourse. You have to close the door on the previous thing behind you in such a way that you can't open it again to move on to the next thing. It does lend itself to metaphors about creativity for sure. But it is funny that Davey just kind of once again smears his own interpretation all over it before you have a chance to think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we got to talk about the epilogue before we wrap up, because I think the epilogue is kind of just like we get no indication that this is a Coda level, right? There's nothing in the narration that says so. It's really just Davey talking to us about his feelings of his need of social validation, how he's dependent on what other people think of him, and like why that led him to doing these things in the first place. And meanwhile, we're just wandering through another just beautifully constructed set piece of a level, where it's just like fascinating, like hallways and temples and like high ceilings. This beautiful, beautiful thing. And I don't know, like I think there's just a certain combination of just walking through these large, magnificent, empty structures while someone talks to you about life and about their experiences and about the things that they're struggling with as a human being, that is just like inherently like emotionally affecting to me.
Sure.
I couldn't like pinpoint why that specific combination is just like, oh wow, it's like life. But it really was. It really was.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm glad we're talking about this because I almost kind of forgot. But for me, that was one of my favorite elements of the game was these, just the feeling you get walking through these spaces that he's created. Mm-hmm. The artists behind this game really have a fantastic sense of how to create like awe or discomfort or kind of just different emotional states as a function of the kind of environment you're walking through and the details of it, the materials it's made out of, the spaciousness of it, or the crampedness of it, or the amount of light that's being let in, where the lights are being placed. That was one thing I actually noticed consciously. It was like he places lights basically strategically to manipulate your sense of how enclosed the space is.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
But I'm sure there's a million other things that I wasn't noticing that were kind of along those lines. Like there's so many stairs. Like there's way more stairs and levels and kind of three-dimensionality to things than you find in real environments, because humans don't actually like climbing stairs that much. But
Right.
you can do it in a game endlessly. And it's funny because, whoa, sorry. It's funny because Myst was a game that was like weirdly special to me, despite the fact that I didn't even finish it. It was more the fact that it showed me for the first time when I was a relatively young kid that you can really get a pretty profound mood going with just settings. Because Myst is another game where there's no other people really. There's very, very little indication of there being other people. And the idea of you being in this kind of beautiful, sometimes creepy, sometimes awe-inspiring setting, and there's nobody else around, it just pushes some buttons in my brain. And this is the first time I've really found a game that recaptured that feeling.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I was like, yeah, I now I remember games can do this. Just imagine how different the experience would have been if there were like NPCs everywhere. Definitely something about the fact that it's a big empty space.
Yeah. I really like. I was so surprised by this game, and I just loved the experience. I think one of the most viscerally satisfying moments for me is when you have the gun and you're just destroying the world.
Yeah.
Like you're literally destroying the level. I loved that. And I don't even know. I'm so doubtful about like what was Coda and what was Davey in this,
Yeah.
because like he's proven himself to just be completely false and unreliable. So like, I don't even know if that was a Coda thing or not. I have no idea. It's fascinating.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about that actually. It's funny because part of me does want to replay it to redo it knowing that Davey is a liar so that I can pay more attention to things. But then part of me is also like, yeah, but didn't you just say that it's not the same experience the second time through? And it's like, and then I have to be like, yeah, it wouldn't be the same experience the second time through. It would be a different experience, but maybe also a valuable one.
Sure. Yeah.
So this will be amusing to you. As I was searching for like the names of the different levels, I realized that of course there's a detailed fandom wiki with which details all of the possible conversation trees and all of the Easter eggs, which of course there are.
Of course,
which is kind of funny that you'd put Easter eggs in a game like this, but so be it.
That is funny.
So that's pretty ironic.
Yeah, I'm sure he loves that those exist.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure
he's... Maybe he does. Maybe I shouldn't put my interpretation of the game to define him as a human being. Maybe he does love it. I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe it's. I'm sure he knew they would exist, right? I'm sure he knew that people would make them.
Yeah. Yeah, I just like he's talking about the concept of developing games. I think just the idea of like and what I love is we're living in a time like AAA gaming is the biggest it's ever been, right? And there's these AAA games and they're huge multi-million-dollar affairs, but like people are making stuff like this. It's just a Source Engine game. It's just like Stanley Parable. I think Stanley Parable started as literally just a Half-Life mod, and that's what it was. And then it got popular and spun out into its own thing. And this seems to, I mean, he says literally in this game that Coda used Source, so I'm guessing this is, it certainly seems like Source, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But I mean, just the idea that like, it's this completely wide open space to explore what games can do in storytelling, what they can mean, how they mean that. And I'm so excited about games right now. Like I'm really excited about this. I'm excited about more games like this, and there's another game that's not like this but that I've been meaning to play called To the Moon that's supposed to be like a very story experience driven game. It's not first person, it's like sprite based, but there's so many opportunities for fascinating, in-depth, wonderful storytelling in this medium that has never existed before. And like it's just not in the big budget, huge games. Not that it's not there, because, we've both said wonderful things about the God of War game, but it's just, I don't know. It's just exciting. It's just really exciting.
Yeah. I love the idea that this can exist and that it can be successful.
Yeah, but it's pretentious, Matt. It's pretentious. I read some critiques of this game, and a lot of them was that it forced some of his thoughts too hard and in a pretentious manner, is what Wikipedia says. Like, I don't even know what pretentious means anymore.
Then you have to be like, okay, reviewer, are you talking about character Davy or are you talking about Davy?
Right.
Because I think Davy's true intentions with this game are not 100% obvious. And Davy is a character, character Davy is a character. He's a fictional tortured soul.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I
don't know.
See this, the tone, the whole feeling of this is my entire jam, and I want, if there are more games that feel like this game, I absolutely want to know about that. I want to play those games because, like, I think I would have been really disappointed if this game became like an adventure at some point. Like because there's so many great adventure games. I don't need any more of those. I want this weird thing that I haven't experienced since I was like 10 years old playing Myst.
Yeah, I love this idea. I love this idea that it's brought you back to Myst, that it's like triggered this thing inside of you that's been dormant for so long. I think that's so fascinating, and I love it to death.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not that it's exactly the same thing. Obviously, it's more like the idea of like, oh, a game can do this. I think it makes sense. Like when you're a kid, especially when we were kids at like the perfect time to be kids because we went from Super Mario Brothers 3 to Zelda Ocarina of Time, like in the span of being like young kids. And the difference between those games is,
oh my gosh,
right. Like basically like fundamentally we're just making slight refinements on Ocarina of Time still.
Yeah.
Whereas like the difference between that and like a side scrolling Mario game was a huge quantum leap. And so we were growing up during this time when games were becoming this thing where you could have these transcendent emotional experiences, and this is the first time in a long time that I've actually felt like, oh yeah, like games can do even more things than I'm aware of, and that's obviously true because people have been cranking away at it for years and years.
Yeah, it's very exciting. It's very like you always go back to the old Roger Ebert quote where he's like, games aren't art, right?
Yeah,
and
right.
Games have never made anyone cry, which is patently untrue now. But I've really enjoyed during my lifetime seeing this medium evolve into a truly an art form, and in all the different ways that's great for the medium, in how it's challenged. Like there's a lot of critical theory around video games right now, and it's pissing a lot of people off, and it's making some people terrible, and I don't like that, but I like the fact that it's gotten to the point where it's being paid enough attention to that happens, right? Because movies piss people off, books piss people off, TV shows piss people off. Video games should be analyzed and interpreted and critiqued in a way that piss people off.
Yeah.
Because I think that's pushing the art form and exploring the art form. And I love, we're in the middle of it, and we're getting to live in the middle of it. And I can't wait to explore it further. I really can't. And one other thing I'll say, I thought about streaming this game. I was going to do it. I was going to stream it. And we only have like a handful of people that watch a stream. It's not very much. We don't do it consistently enough to actually build a streaming audience. I'm kind of glad I didn't, Matt. I'm kind of glad that this was just a me and my screen experience, and I didn't have to talk to anyone else. And I didn't. And I love sharing games with people. I love playing games and having people watch. It's like something, even as a kid, even if I was playing something single player, I just liked when my parents would come watch me play. And I was like, I had an audience, and I like streaming, and I think it's fun. But I'm glad I played this by myself.
Yeah, I mean, that would have been really weirdly meta to be like, you're giving your commentary on Dave's commentary on Coda's game,
that's true.
While other people are leaving their internet notes on your performance.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that would have been really distracting to me because I mean, I really did get sucked in. Like I said, I lost track of time. That wouldn't happen if I was streaming, obviously.
Yeah, I heard it was a 1.5 to 2 hour game, and that's what I was expecting. And then it got to the end, and I was like, That was 2 hours. I didn't realize that was 2 hours.
Yeah, me too. Which is weird because it's like what exactly about this experience is so enrapturing. I don't know what the word is even, like, because you look at it on paper, it's like, yeah, that sounds boring. But it's anything but.
Yeah. Loved it. Great experience. Thank you so much, Torch Salesman, for having us experience this.
Yeah.
I'm so happy about it. Like, it's been our patron produced stuff the last few weeks have been just wonderful experiences that I'm so glad I got to partake in.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Good choices, everybody. And yeah, thank you, Torch Salesman.
Yeah. All right, guys. I think that is it for us this week. You can find the Beginner's Guide on Steam. It's a $10 game. It's not that expensive, and it's cheaper than a movie, as long as a movie and comparable experience to like a really good movie. So I think that's well worth the price.
Yeah. So yeah, if you're not already subscribed to the Doofcast, we encourage you to do so and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
And of course, you can find all the other shows we do over at our website, doofmedia.com. Again, no Doofcast next week, but we do have a bunch of shows going on next week, including, Matt, what should we talk about? Well, Do the Right Thing is moving, right?
Do the Right Thing is moving their schedule to accommodate the host's academic schedule. Very understandable. No real big deal. I mean, basically just the final due date will be on a different day.
The episodes are coming out Thursday now? I can't remember. Monday. They're coming out Monday.
Yeah, the words are still move, unused, abaft, eraser. Some good stories in there this week. And
if you like what we do here and want to support us like Torch Salesman, consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. Head on over to patreon.com, pledge $1 a month or whatever else you can afford to help ensure we keep growing and keep making new stuff. We are seven, the magic number is seven patrons away from hitting our next goal. So if you've been like hanging out and wondering when a good time to support us is, right now.
Yep. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
So please consider also rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts if you can. Every review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
All right, guys, we will be off next week, but we will be back in 2 weeks with, and I'm desperately pulling up the calendar so I can read it. Where is it? It's another patron-produced episode.
Yay.
In 2 weeks, we will be talking about the movie Hunt for the Wilder People, which is a Taika Waititi film that I don't think you've ever seen, Matt.
I have not.
I can't wait for you to watch that movie. That'll be in 2 weeks from today being the day that it came out.
Exciting.
Dates are confusing. It's going to be the 4th of October. October 4th, we'll be back for a new episode. Enjoy your weekend. And goodbye, everyone. Bye-bye. The fuck was that?
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.